Welcome to Simply Timeless. I'm Jay Daniels. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. Since the mid-'50s, Chicago's Ramsey Lewis has been sharing his brand of jazz music with listeners and fans all around the world. In fact, in the mid-'60s, he and his Ramsey Lewis trio had a top 10 hit with The In Crowd. That was during a live recording at Bohemian Caverns at Washington, D.C. And now in 2020, as Ramsey prepares to celebrate his 85th birthday, he goes live once again through a series of monthly streaming concerts called the Saturday Salon. We'll talk about that, along with some of the stories that helped impact Ramsey's career. We start at the very beginning by talking about the influence of his mom and dad in Chicago, Illinois.
My family, my dad came here from Georgia, outside Macon, Georgia, country man. I started to say country boy. He was young when he came here. And my mom came from Mississippi, a little town, I don't know the name of it, outside Jackson, Mississippi. And they, like so many black people back in those days, were just trying to get away from all the issues and problems that were going on 60, 70, 80 years ago in the South. And so they both came to Chicago, and they didn't know each other. One from Mississippi and one from Georgia, but they ended up in the same church, and that's how they met each other, and it ended up with them getting married.
Which church was that?
Oh boy, I don't know exactly what church it was then. I do know that Dad, the whole family ended up at Wayman, W-Y-M-A-N, A-M-E, African Methodist Episcopal Church, on the near north side of Chicago. And at that point, I was about 11 years old, and I knew classical music very well. I hadn't gotten into jazz really, but by going to church so much, I knew gospel music. So my dad says, okay, son, they used to call me Sonny, you're going to play for the choir, the gospel choir.
Yeah.
And I'm going to conduct. So come to rehearsal Thursday night. So I went to rehearsal, and we learned these songs, and sure enough, Sunday morning, there I was up on the stage, whatever you call it in church, playing for the choir. And so up until that point, it was all classical music, Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, Debussy, etc., Ravel, all the classical composers. And so gospel opened my eyes to music that if people, in classical music, you sit tentatively, and you listen quietly. Gospel music is just the opposite. If people don't start at least moving in their seat and moving their head, and then the next step is clapping their hands, and the next step after that is standing up, praising the Lord, putting their hands in the air, or clapping their hands and moving and sort of dancing in the aisle, you haven't done anything. It's like back to the drawing board. So it's all about reaching out to people's emotions. There was another church musician at that time when I first started playing. There wasn't a piano and organ. There was two pianos, and the other piano player was Wallace Burton, and he was 3 or 4 years older than me, or maybe a little more. And he heard me play gospel music and classical music, and he thought that I could play jazz. So one Sunday, Wallace says, "Hey, Ramsey, you want to play with our group?" "Yeah, what group?" He says, "We got a 7-piece jazz group." I think I'm 15 by now, though. And I said, "Yeah." So my parents says, "Okay, well, somebody's got to pick him up. Somebody's got to bring him back." So Wallace, hearing me play classical and gospel, thought I could play whatever, and said, "Okay, we're playing a dance from 7 to 10 at Union Park Temple." It was actually a gym, but they had converted it for that evening into like a ballroom. It had a stage already, and we got on stage, and I was at the piano, and he says, "Okay, well, let's start out with," he named the song, I don't know, it was "All the Things You Are," or "I'm in the Mood for Love," or some standard. I said, "Well, I don't know that." He named me the 8 standards in a row. and I didn't know any of them. So he said, "Well, Ramsey, you go sit over on the side." It was a 7-piece band, and he played piano also. And afterwards, he brought me home, but he said, "If you want to learn this music, go over to my house, and I'll teach you a few things." And that's how jazz was added to my gospel classical training. Back in those days, you could take LPs into a listening booth, and you could listen to them, and you could put them back and tell the salesperson, "Well, not today, thank you." So he says, go to Hudson Ross. That was the big record shop downtown, and listen to Oscar Peterson, listen to Bud Powell, listen to George Shearing, listen to Errol Garner, and he named all these. So I did that over a few days because I was working not far from there, and I got an idea of what he was talking about. I'm like, oh boy. Listening to Bud Powell and George Shearing and those guys, I don't know if I'll ever. But he showed me a few things, and he said, "Start here. I'm going to show you the blues, how to play the blues. These are blues chords, and these are rhythm and blues chords, which are different than just blues chords, and this and that." I mean, long story short, he just brought me along, and he was patient to the point where he said, "Now you got to learn one piece that you can play as a solo, because everybody in the 7-piece band had a feature song." So I had heard Earl Garner play Penthouse Serenade, and I really loved the way he played. So as I listen today, I don't know how the heck I thought I was playing like he was playing Penthouse Serenade, but that was my feature song. And so I kind of got into jazz. I guess I was around 14, 15 years old.
Mm. So from that point to where you were, emulating the likes of Errol Garner and Bud Powell and others, did you ever think to yourself, this is what I'm going to do for a career? I love asking this question. Or was it just a hobby that you thought you might have alongside some other work?
No, it was something that I just loved to do, and I never thought of touring. I never thought of nightclubs or whatever else. I just thought of learning music. And I had a wonderful piano teacher named Dorothy Mendelson, who introduced me to Bach, Beethoven, and such. And I loved to play classical music. And it was all about playing piano. And for whatever reason, during those early days, I never thought, even at 15, when you started playing with this band and you listen to these other players and read on the back of the album where they had played here and there and everywhere, I never got the itch to say, "Oh wow, I'd love to play New York. Oh wow, I'd love to play wherever." It's just I was just in love with the sound of the piano, the feel of the piano, and I think Dorothy Mendelson, who was my piano teacher I think I got to meet her when I was 11 years old. The way she taught piano just made me fall in love with playing the piano. She used to say, "Ramsey, she stood about 4'9" or whatever. And she would sit there and she said, "Ramsey, you must make the piano sing." Mm. And I would play, and she said, No, get up. And she'd sit there, and if not making the piano sing, then she would say, "And sometimes you must make the piano roar." And Jesus, she started playing something else. And it seems to me the piano wanted to jump up and run out of the room. And I said, this little lady can go from sweetness to that, and it's all in the touch. And I just fell in love with the piano and the sound of the piano, and the feel of the piano. And there was nothing in me that said, you want to play in front of folks one day. That never occurred to me. And I think now looking back, you're making me look back over all this. There was never anything that said, I want to play in front of folks. Things just happened, and Ramsey, do you want to do this? Well, Ramsey, come and play here. And those opportunities just opened up. And I said, oh, okay. I'll do that. And there you are. And even now, with this opportunity that we have, I was just practicing the piano, and I got to I threw in my scales. I still practice scales and arpeggios, and I got through that kind of stuff. And I still have a book of all kinds of exercises. And so a song came to me, and it was Russ Freeman. Russ Freeman was a piano player back, 60 years ago, 50 years ago. And he did an album with strings with Chet Baker. And on there was a song called The Wind.
Mm.
And I played that way long time ago. And it started coming to me, and I was trying to work it out. And it began coming to me. It began coming until finally I got it all down. And I played it. And I was so happy about it. I was still playing it. I looked up, and who should be standing behind me with her phone, with the sound or whatever. It kind of startled me. It was my wife. And she says, "That is so beautiful." And I said, well, she said, "What is that?" It's The Wind, Russ Freeman. It's on an album, Chet Baker with strings with Russ Freeman. Russ Freeman wrote it. He says, "That is so gorgeous." I said, "I thought you were in your studio." She's an artist. "I thought you were in your studio painting." "No, that song just pulled me out." And so she sent it to Brett, my manager. And then Brett got all involved. And so now you know why all this is going on.
I do think there are certain things in life that are meant only for one person, and that's you or me. And those opportunities did come your way. And it's a funny thing. I still listen to your recordings. In fact, one of the first, as we talked about earlier, was from 1965, a live recording of The In Crowd by Billy Page. And there is something very unique about your music in that it can touch the soul even now, 40, 50 years later after its recordings. And I kind of want to talk about this relationship of yours, specifically in how you were able to introduce jazz to a lot of non-jazz listeners.
Well, you know what I think? I think I didn't study. Most jazz piano players, as they were getting into jazz, they kind of studied Bud Powell, and they kind of studied the jazz piano players. And for whatever reason, I never actually, I listened to Bud Powell. I liked him. But he wasn't one of my main influences. And I think that is what kind of set me aside. Now, I didn't know that at the time, was the fact that I loved gospel music, and that was always in me, and that I loved European classical music, because that's what I studied. That's the piano music, Bach, Chopin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is sort of made up, if you will, harmonically and otherwise, because I was kind of criticized at first, because some of the early jazz critics and such, they didn't hear Bud Powell and I playing. They didn't hear some of those early piano masters in my playing. It was almost like the nerve of you, not, and I didn't know. The early influence for me, as I'm repeating myself now, was classical music and gospel music, as it is today. I dearly love jazz, and I of course I do. I've got all the jazz piano players on my, but I guess the variety of what I have on there is jazz and classical and R&B and pop, and I've never been just. Most jazz musicians and players, sometimes they get immersed into jazz, and although I love jazz and dearly, I was never totally immersed in that, and I was criticized for that in the early days, because some of the reporters and some of the reviewers and critics, especially critics, didn't hear that in my music early on. And they were almost like the nerve of you. And I didn't care. I just had to do what I did. And thank God I did.
And I was going to ask you about that because I look at a lot of the songs that I first heard from you. You know, The In Crowd, Hang On Sloopy, A Hard Day's Night. I mean, those are all pop songs. Those are all rock and roll tunes. And there's a discussion that continues even here in 2020 about what is jazz? You know, what ingredients make up jazz? Like if you hear a song, you say, "Oh, that's jazz." And there was one executive who said recently that he did not want to see the crossing of jazz and pop again as it was in the 50s and 60s. And I suppose people are entitled to their opinions, but for me, especially as one who, I didn't grow up on jazz, I found your music listening to oldie stations. And it wasn't until later that I delved deeper. But what is it then, even with those musical ingredients in mind, even with the criticism you got, thinking about those recordings, whether it's then or now, what is it that you think did connect with people, whether or not they were lifelong jazz fans? What do you think it was about your trio's sound that really made an impact on people?
Well, you know, LD Young and Red Holt, they too were brought up in the church. And so besides there being jazz, that were our main influence, we both stemmed from that gospel feel. And when we played together, there was a connection between us. And the In Crowd, which was our first so-called hit, almost didn't get on the album because the three of us were in LD Red and myself. We were in Washington, D.C., playing a club somewhere, and we were going to record an album, and we had all the songs that we were going to do, but we wanted what we called a fun song because we had gotten in the habit of putting what we called one fun song on the album. So album for that, I think, I forgot what the fun song was, but we didn't have a fun song.
Yeah. And
so the waitress came over. What are you guys doing? We're trying to think of a song. She says, "Have you heard Dolby Gray's The In Crowd?" Well, LD and Red had heard it. They said, "Yeah, we've heard it." I said, "Well, I haven't heard it." Knowing that we got the meat and potatoes of the album, we just needed something that this so-called fun song. So she went over to the jukebox in a coffee shop. Hello, not today, but she played this song, Dolby Gray's with the In Crowd, and I said, "That's perfect. That's a fun song. It's it's people. It reaches out and touches most people." And that was the last song to go with the album because we thought we had those songs that were going to sell the album were already on it. And this was just something to be light and gay and fun. And we put the In Crowd on there. And when the album started selling, Leonard and Phil Chess called us in Detroit. Said, "Hey, I think you boys have a hit." "What do you mean a hit?" Hit in those days were like rock and roll and pop. I mean, that word wasn't used in jazz. A hit? Somebody's going to hit you upside your head. What do you mean a hit? So they said, "You know that song, The In Crowd?" Yeah, that fun song. We can't keep the album, and we put that on the album, and we can't keep the album in stock. We looked, LD and I looked at each other and said, "Well, my God, all the work we put in on those so-called serious songs and the fun song," which we had fun recording. I mean, we recorded it live. In fact, we almost didn't get to it because we recorded it at this club in Washington, D.C., Bohemian Caverns. And Bohemian Caverns was mainly for the John Coltrane's and those kind of people. So we were just something unusual that they brought us in. And sure enough, when we got there and we were playing, fortunately we had some good music, some serious songs, and they were sitting there with their chin, their hands on their chin, as if they were students, kind of checking us out. These guys, who are these guys? And they were giving us applause, and we were going through the set, and we were having fun. Finally, Red Holt, Red looked over at me and said, "Hey, Ramsey, we haven't played that new song. We haven't played the In Crowd." I said, "Oh, wow, you're right." So we started playing the In Crowd. These serious people, that what you hear on the record, that's them. They got They got up from the tables. They pushed chairs back, and they're clapping their hands, and they're egging us on, and they're pushing us, and they're dancing. And we looked at each other, looked at them, looked back at each other like, what's going on? And there you are. I don't know, that's the way the In Crowd, and then of course that became a huge hit.
I think most people know, I don't know how you feel about this, but most people know you're recording a wordless, instrumental better than Dobie Gray's original.
Yeah, we outsold his. His was on its way, or I don't know if it had been on its. I don't know if it was already a hit and then was coming down the chart or whatever. But I do know you're right that the In Crowd was on the pop chart. Hello, a jazz record in the top 5 on the pop chart. Unheard of. And that's what got us started.
And you mean to tell me that a short time before you played it at Bohemian Caverns, you had never heard the song before?
No.
That okay. I did not expect to hear you say that. Because if someone would have said, Ramsey Lewis just learned that song a short time before that record, I'd have said, oh, get out of here. That's not true. And lo and behold, that is what happened. My goodness.
Yeah, weeks before. In those days, we carried portable phonographs around with us. They were almost like small suitcases, very portable. And we had to buy the record, and we put it on, and there it was. And thank God for Nettie Gray. I'll never forget her name. She's the one who went to the jukebox and played that song. And we went and bought the record and took the record back to the hotel, and we learned it. And it was easy to learn because, there's only a few chords to it. And there you go.
You are one of few people in the world of jazz who has, you began recording in the mid-50s. You were familiar with jazz a few years before that, and here we are in 2020. So you have seen quite a few changes, and you've been there in the midst of these changes with your own performances. Walk us through some of the changes and evolutions in your own musical sound that you've had to employ as the landscape itself changed.
Well, I must admit that as the Fender Rhodes electric piano came in, we had the promoters make sure they had one on stage for me to play. And as I went over, it was very close to the Steinway. As I went over to play it, it was fun and interesting for a couple songs. But I noticed deep inside I couldn't wait to get back over on the Steinway. And this went on for a few months till finally, thank God we could afford to hire somebody to play the electric piano and other keyboards, and I could stay on the Steinway. So as other synthesizers came in, I put a synthesizer in the top of the Steinway over the keyboard, over the right inside there. And I tried that for a while, and then that was taking too much of me away from the keys that I really loved, and that was just below this electric thing on top of it. So I gave that to the keyboard player that we had hired. I said, you do this. So it obviously, and now that I'm saying this, it makes me realize that it's because I started taking piano lessons when I was 11 and started getting serious when I was 12, 13, and Wallace Burton and the Clefs and jazz when I was 15, and Dorothy Mendelsohn and the piano, the acoustic piano, the Steinway acoustic piano. They only make acoustic pianos, but the Steinway piano is me. It's my life. I can spend hours and hours and hours at the piano, not as many at a time because I'm a little older. I have to stop after a couple hours and go rest and come back and spend a couple more hours. But the Steinway is like my other woman. Don't tell my wife that.
Secret safe with me, Ramsey.
Okay, but that's it. The Steinway is my trip around the world. The Steinway is my trip into another realm. The Steinway, the piano, the acoustic piano. When I sit down there, I can just spend hours and I get lost into the music, into the feel, the sound of the music, of the piano music. To this day, that's why I said, "Why did you come out?" She has this beautiful studio. I said, "Why did you come out here?" He said, "There was peace and da-da-da-da-da." And it was, I was just getting so involved. This was only a few weeks ago. In this piece and the way it sounds and the feeling of it. And it's going to happen when we get through this interview. I'm going to go sit down at my Steinway here in the house, and I'm going to practice. And that's the other thing I love to practice. You know, I've learned from Dorothy Mendelsohn. And then after that, I had a piano coach, Eloise Neva. And because I don't know how I got away from Dorothy Mendelsohn. But anyway, practicing scales and arpeggios and certain things, I love to do that. I mean, I can spend an hour, 2 hours just going up and down the piano, just the sound, the feel of the piano. It's like the other woman. Don't tell my wife.
I wasn't planning to go into this in the interview, but we both were brought up in the church. I think I think faith still plays an important role in our lives. Yeah. But I do believe that there is something very deep and very spiritual, whether you're a person of faith or not. I think that is something that matters when you sit down at the instrument.
For sure.
And that's why you still do it, even, you're about to turn 85. That's why you still do it.
Lord knows. It's a connection with all there is. And all there is we call God.
And that's what's kept you recording. I mean, you put out a new album last year, and you have slowed down your tour schedule a bit, I think, right?
No, I quit 2 years ago.
What made you do that?
Well, I don't tell many people this, and you're the last person I should be telling, but I'm going to tell you. First of all, it was starting to get very aggravating to get to O'Hare or LaGuardia or the airport in Washington or any of the major airports and be told your plane is late. Well, that's okay. Planes are late. And now go to gate 38. The gate's been changed. Okay. And well, now the gate is now going to be gate 42. Okay, no problem. And this would go on the last few years of my traveling. So finally, I think I'm 80 years old or 81, whatever. And my wife says, "Oh, the gate's changed." Yeah, it's gate 40. So we went to we walked over to gate 40 somewhere, and they said, "Oh, it's changed again." So I said, "Honey, she says, I'm going to get you a wheelchair," she says. And so when she said that, she did. She got the wheelchair. I sat in the wheelchair, but while she wasn't pushing me, one of the workers, I forgot what you call them, was pushing me. She was going beside us. That's when I said to myself, "This is it. It's time for me to give it up. Because I used to be able to walk from this part of the airport to the other part of the airport and go down to gate whatever and and they changed the gate, and I'd go to the other terminal and this other terminal and go to that gate and this gate. No big deal. And we'd be having fun talking, walking and talking and walking. But when the word, would you get my husband a wheelchair? Not because I was crippled, not because I was hurting, but she saw that at that point in my life and all of the airports, and the way the flights were changing and the gates were whatever, it was time. And so when I heard the word wheelchair, that's when I started saying, it's time. It's time, Ramsey. And that was it. So I figured it was all over. It was it. I'm good. I come in here and I'm sitting near my piano now. And you know the rest of the story. The next is the Win, and she comes out. Funny, she's involved in both these stories. And from me doing the Win, and she called Brett the manager. And Brett the manager said, "Boy, has he ever thought of this or doing this, that, and the other?" And from that, now I'm whatever I'm doing. I don't know, streaming or whatever. All I know is they tell me, "Okay, come in here and play. Sit down and play." And they turn on these microphones, and I talk to her. She opens up this whatever I talk into while I'm sitting at the piano, and it's fun.
And I think they're calling it the Saturday Salon, and you've got one of these streaming concerts coming up, which you don't have to go to Gate 42 for this one, but you're doing monthly streaming. You're doing monthly streaming concerts. In fact, there's one coming up very soon on Saturday, May the 30th at 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. And what can we expect to hear from you? I mean, this is an opportunity for you not to only perform, but to also interact with the viewers too, I suppose.
They don't get to talk to me, but I get to talk to them. And I do play the piano, and I take the opportunity to tell them a little bit about the song, who wrote it, or where I first heard it, or why I played it. I just have a wonderful time knowing that there's an audience out there listening and watching. Although I can't see them, the feeling of playing in front of people again, it kind of gives me a rush. And I get something very positive and electric going on. And I'm excited because I've started making out show lists again. I used to do that when we travel. There's certain songs like The In-Ground, others that you got to play at the end of the show. But before those songs, you got to play some songs, that are not the so-called hit records. So I'm back doing that again. Wow, is it fun? I pulled out some Ellington, and I pulled out some other stuff, and I'm making a playlist for this week, and I'm making up playlists for next month, and it's just, I don't know. With this going on, I might live to be 105. Who knows?
Well, I hope that you'll be playing piano for that entire time too. Let's face it, Ramsey. People need to hear your music. I think they do.
You're very kind. Thank you. I do love playing.
And let me ask you a question. As you prepare to celebrate your 85th birthday and performing for well over 65 years, why music?
I think because that was the first creative expression that I learned. And I learned it so young that painting or any of the other creative endeavors, I learned them in school, high school, and other places. But by high school and college, I was so deeply into music. And music was in our family. When I was young, there were songs my dad used to love to sing, and he would bring some piano, some songs over, and he'd say, "Come on over." They used to call me Sonny. "Sonny, come over and play this for me." And so music was in the house, it was in the family, and it was music on Sundays all day. It was music at rehearsal. And then at high school, when I was in high school, Now I'm 14, 15, 16 years old. And the high school I went to had mixed choir, and it had ballet, had modern dance, and the kids had to put on a musical, the students, once a year. And I hardly got through math and English classes because some student would always come in and say, they need Ramsey in ballet, they need Ramsey in chorus, they need Ramsey in this, that, and the other. So as far back as when I was 4 years old through 11 through now, music, 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 piano, piano, piano. Piano's my other woman.
Ramsey Lewis, our in-studio guest from Simply Timeless. More information about the Saturday Salon can be found on the website ramseylewis.com. That's going to be on Saturday, May the 30th at 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central. Tickets for the online stream available for $20 each. Again, our thanks to Ramsey Lewis for taking the time to speak with me, and also to his manager, Brett Steele, for his help. And I thank you, our listener, for joining us as we embark upon this journey of musical discovery together. Thanks for joining us in studio. I'm Jay Daniels. Have a great week ahead.